you're a piano player who regularly entertains friends and family at the keyboard, and you would like to spice up your evening entertainment, then melodrama is something you may wish to consider. A dramatic reading provides a unique offering for your evening guests. There is wonderful music written by well-known composers that accompanies excellent stories by great authors. At the very end of the 19th century, Richard Strauss composed two wonderful melodramas. The piano part of both works is very engaging and fulfilling for the pianist. These works are much like tone poems for the keyboard and contain wonderful leitmotifs for the various characters and dramatic situations portrayed in the stories. One of the pieces is a short miniature, while the other is a full evening's length performance. Strauss composed both to perform with a friend of his, an actor and renowned master of poetry recitation named Ernst von Possart. And I likely just butchered the pronunciation of that name as well. Mr. Possart had helped Strauss obtain a position as chief conductor of the Munich Opera, and in return for the favor, Strauss wrote these two melodramas to perform with him. The shorter of the two works is entitled Castle by the Sea, about 6 minutes in length. The poetry is a dialogue between two people who have seen a castle and its inhabitants, but from very different points of view, and presumably at different times. The piano part is very enjoyable. It depicts rushing waves, horn calls from the castle, and the joys and sorrows seen by the two conversants in the poem. Strauss's other melodrama is a setting of a poem by British laureate Alfred Lord Tennyson. The piece is extremely difficult and appropriate only for professional pianists. Please do not try this one at home unless you have really serious keyboard skills. About an hour in length, the work tells the story of a hero's life, from his humble beginnings with his childhood sweetheart to his shipwreck and years on a desert island, and his eventual return home to the village where he grew up on the English coast, but only to find that his wife had remarried his childhood rival. Strauss created leitmotifs for the three characters in the story and the dramatic situations as the characters come into conflict. The music builds to an intense climax, much like Strauss's operas or tone poems. This work is perhaps the height of the Romantic era melodrama. Patrick Stewart and Emanuel Axe even have a recording of this piece, if anyone is interested in hearing an amazing collaboration. The style and mood of narrations changed around the turn of the 20th century. The early to mid-20th century saw the composition of several wonderful melodramas by leading composers, including Prokofiev, Poulenc, and Cited. Although conceived for orchestra from its inception, Prokofiev first scored his famous Peter and the Wolf for the piano, playing the keyboard part himself at his first performance. He wrote the work in 1936 for the Central Children's Theater in Moscow. Only later did he orchestrate it into the work we know and love today. The solo piano version is surprisingly effective, but although the music does fit very well under the hands, it is something that's rather difficult for advanced level players. This is another one of those do not try this at home pieces of piano music. So unless you're an extremely advanced piano player willing to donate serious time to learning it, just enjoy listening. Another 20th century piece written for children was Poulenc's Babar the White Elephant. Poulenc's 3-year-old cousin gave him the challenge of creating music to this tale when she placed a copy of her storybook, Babar the Elephant, on the piano and said, "Play this." To entertain his little cousin, Poulenc improvised an accompaniment to each scene in the story. The music was an instant hit, and news of his improvisation spread throughout the neighborhood. His neighbors began coming by to hear the new piece, and eventually Poulenc put pen to paper and dedicated the work to his young cousin and his neighbors. The piece is an amazing example of Poulenc's mastery of characterization through music. The piano brings out the various animals in the story through the rhythms, melodies, textures, and tempos, depicting the elephants, birds, hunters, and the joys and fears of Babar. While most of the movements in this piece are difficult, several lend themselves to late intermediate piano players. So this is another piece you can try at home. Of the different fusions of literature and music, melodrama is by far the most neglected and misunderstood. Throughout its history, it has had little critical success. Music critics have written about the defects of the genre. One even wrote, "The speaking voice and music do not blend. Melodramatic music is a thing of formally undeveloped and unconnected patches and snatches." The low regard that music critics have for these pieces is largely due to the fact that this type of music is looked at from a purely musical point of view. And this is problematic because this art form is not a purely musical art form as one expects when going to the concert hall, nor is it purely theater as one expects when going out to the theater. Melodrama is a melding of the two, and to view melodrama as a sort of song without singing or a type of theater with incidental music completely misses the point of this genre. Melodramatic music is a true fusion of both and stands by itself. As a musician, this is often difficult to reconcile, as this literature has many of the hallmarks of the song repertoire, and it frustrates one's expectations of melody and lyricism. But this type of literature offers a unique and engaging perspective and can spice up evening entertainments. Again, if one is a pianist who regularly entertains friends and family at the keyboard. The melodrama is something that quickly engages audiences in stories of ghosts and knights in shining armor or wild animals, but engages audiences in a unique way. I hope you have enjoyed this brief look at music for pianist and narrator. I will include my sources and recommended reading in the description down below if you're interested in learning more about this. I will also include a list of recommended compositions and links to musical scores for those of you interested in playing some of this music at the piano yourselves. We have a melodrama playlist on this channel. I'll also include a link to that, as well as a link to our CDs, one of which is dedicated to melodramas. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video.